Imagine an orphaned baby, abandoned by his father's death before he was even born, who barely had time to know his mother before she too was gone forever. Homeless, nameless among the great ones of his city, Muhammad seemed destined to vanish into the desert dust. But against all odds, this boy, ignored by the world, was chosen to change the fate of humanity. What many know of him is only the surface: victories, prayers, pilgrimages. But the true story is hidden. The silent journey of an orphan, shaped by pain, guided by faith, and rejected by the oldest sacred books. Why is Muhammad, the man who transformed an entire civilization, not mentioned in the Bible like the prophets who came before him? What hidden forces silenced his name from the pages that tell the story of faith? And most importantly, what did God himself reveal to him at the end of his mission? Today, we will uncover the untold story of Muhammad, the prophet excluded from the Bible. We'll follow his journey from abandonment in the desert to the day he was called to recite words that would change the course of humanity. And at the apex of that journey, we'll reveal the secret few dare to face. And that may forever change the way you see the history of faith. Stay with us. The greatest mystery in history is about to be revealed. Join us as we explore how Mahomet, the orphan of the desert, became a symbol of faith, courage, and transformation amid the greatest spiritual challenges in history. Mecca, 570. After Christ, a city bustling with trade, idolatry, and tribal disputes. The sun mercilessly scorched the golden dunes of the Arabian Peninsula. Amid the dryness of the desert, Mecca rose like an oasis for merchants and travelers, but also as a center of worship to stone gods. It was a city where life blended with dust, and true faith seemed buried beneath the weight of 1,000 superstitions. In this arid and divided land, a boy was born who would change the fate of his generation. Muhammad came into the world without the warmth of his father's embrace. Abdullah, his father, died before he could even see his son, leaving his young mother, Amina, wrapped in grief and uncertainty. From his very first cry, Muhammad was an orphan of destiny, marked by absence and loneliness. Amina, with sad yet courageous eyes, tried to protect her son in a city that offered little shelter for the vulnerable. But a mother's protection also had its limits. When Muhammad was still very young, cruel fate struck once more. Amina fell, ill during a journey, and, amid the dust of the road, closed her eyes forever. Without father or mother, Muhammad was entrusted to the care of his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, one of the most respected men of Mecca. Abdul, already aged, saw in the boy a special spark. He held his small hand with a protective strength, trying to fend off the invisible storms surrounding the orphan. Under his guardianship, Muhammad learned to observe, to see what others ignored. However, time is relentless, and soon it would tear away what little remained. Abdul Muttalib, the old pillar supporting the boy, died while Muhammad was still very young. Once again, he found himself cast into the winds of survival, entrusted to the care of his uncle Abu Talib, a traveling merchant who knew the dangers of the desert roads. Abu Talib loved Muhammad like a son, but life at his side was hard. Muhammad learned early on that the world was a place made of farewells, and that the hearts of men were harder than the stones of the Kaaba. He grew up among the voices of greedy merchants and the chance to stone idols, yet his gaze was that of someone searching for something more, something even he could not yet define. In the city where children were shaped by ambition or fear, Muhammad grew up in silence, carrying in his chest a void that caravans, coins, and tribal feasts could not fill. There was a quiet fire in his eyes, a restlessness that seemed to whisper, "You were not made to be just another." The story of his family was an echo of loss and renunciation. An absent father, a mother buried far from home, a grandfather lost to old age, an uncle struggling against poverty to support him. It was as if every bond meant to sustain him was torn away by force, leaving only the cold desert wind to cradle his boyhood dreams. Thus, Muhammad was born among the ruins of a lineage marked by sorrow, in the shadows of a city that worshipped stones and forgot to look to the sky. No grand promises were recorded for him in the annals of men, yet over his empty cradle hovered a silent whisper, a hidden promise that not even the desert could silence. The untold story of Muhammad, the prophet excluded from the Bible, began here, not as a tale of immediate glory, but as a journey where loneliness would be his first and most faithful companion. But the loneliness surrounding his cradle was only the prelude to a long journey of trials. Mecca's streets swarmed under the relentless heat. Colorful fabrics fluttered in the markets, perfumes exhaled from the tents, and coins tinkled like bells, worshipping power and gold. To many, Mecca was the center of the world. To an orphaned boy, however, it was but a field of invisible battles, where every smile could conceal rejection. Still small, Muhammad wandered among the stalls with watchful eyes. It wasn't the spectacle of commerce that impressed him, but the silent loneliness whispering behind every hurried face. He was a shadow moving through color, bearing on his shoulders a loss few could understand. After Amina's death, the world seemed to shrink. Each step felt hollow, each sunset brought fresh abandonment. Under his grandfather Abdul Muttalib's care, Muhammad found some relief. The aging leader, though weary with years, saw in the orphaned boy something he could not explain, a gaze that carried questions even elders dared not ask. Abdul Muttalib held Muhammad's hand firmly. He led him around the Kaaba, showed him ancestral traditions, recounted stories of kings and prophets forgotten in the sands of time. Yet even in moments of tender affection, Muhammad felt something missing, as if the warmth he sought could not be found beneath tents or behind gilded walls. Aware of his own frailty, the grandfather tried to pass on the last vestiges of his nearly lost wisdom. At night, under the desert's starry cloak, he spoke of the soul's call and the need to keep one's heart steadfast, even when every wind blows against you. "There is something greater than us, Muhammad," Abdul would murmur in his hoarse voice, "something that neither sand can erase nor time can bury." Those words burned into the boy's memory like fire. But the desert is merciless to the weak. When Muhammad barely grasped the world, he lost his protector again. Abdul Muttalib was taken by death, like the last flicker of light snuffed out in a storm. Muhammad watched the burial with dry eyes, not because he did not feel, but because grief was an old acquaintance, weary even of tears. Now it was Abu Talib's turn, his uncle, to care for him. A man of firm spirit but modest means, who crossed the desert negotiating spices, pelts, and perfumes. Abu Talib had no riches to offer, but he gave Muhammad something rarer: dignity. Under his care, the boy was not a burden, but a true member of the family. Journeys through the desert became part of young Muhammad's life. The sand scorched his feet, the sun burned his skin, but his eyes remained alert. observing merchants' harshness, men's deceit, the futility of those chasing fleeting glitter. And between each bargain and each night's silence, something grew within him, a deep thirst, not for wealth, but for a higher purpose. Many nights Muhammad lay beneath the open sky, staring at the stars. He silently asked if there was more beyond. Dust and greed, if some truth lay buried under Mecca's 1,000 confused voices. He felt his life would not follow the common path. A restlessness called to him, distant like thunder beyond the horizon. His childhood was not of play or easy affection. It was shaped by loss, rejection, the need to survive among those who offered little to the weak. Each blow of fate, each mourning, each absence dug a deeper hole in his heart. In that empty space bloomed a silent, unbreakable strength. While other boys sought fame in their clans, Muhammad sought meaning in the invisible. While others erected tents of vanity, he planted his feet on the dry ground of reality, knowing human promises could not be trusted. With each loss came not just a wound, but also new preparation, as if life was training him to bear burdens few could withstand. Abu Talib, humble though he was, taught him the value of one's word, honor over profit, and respect for the humble, virtues that would form the foundation of everything Muhammad would preach years later. But in that moment, the boy carried more questions than answers, and the desert silence seemed to hold all the hidden truths. Time passed like the caravans traversing the city, swiftly, impersonally, indifferently. Muhammad grew in stature and spirit, watching, reflecting, questioning. Not yet a man, but no longer a child, he was suspended between two worlds, awaiting the moment his destiny would call him. Every loss he endured was not merely tragedy, but also a summons. A silent, profound, irresistible call. With every new absence, every fresh burial, a voice seemed to whisper, "You have been set apart for something greater. Stand firm." Yet the young boy did not know how greatly this steadfastness would be tested. Nonetheless, even more trials awaited him down the road. The heat of Mecca spread through the streets like a living wave, making the air shimmer above the market tents. It was the scent of spices, leather, and dust, mixed with the incessant noise of haggling voices. To most, it was the soundtrack of wealth. To an orphaned boy, though, it was only a field of invisible battles where every smile could mask rejection. "Handle this load as if it were your very life," said Abu Talib, handing him small bundles of rare cloth. The uncle, his beard streaked by time, looked at his nephew with a mix of pride and worry. "A man's true worth lies in his word, Muhammad. Never forget that." "I will not forget, uncle," the young man replied, determination shining in his eyes. From a very early age, Muhammad moved among the city's merchants, but refused to be deceived by the gleam of coins. He watched closely how men weighed their profits and their lies on the same scale. He saw, without speaking, how gold corrupted even the kindest smiles. One morning, while negotiating a batch of dates, a shrewd trader tried to cheat him. "This lot is the finest in the city, young Al-Amin," said the man, rubbing his greasy hands. "Yours for 20 coins? Muhammad examined the fruit carefully. Some were shriveled, hidden beneath the fresher ones. "If it truly is the best in the city," he said, raising his eyes to the merchant, "why hide it beneath lies?" The market fell silent. Onlookers exchanged discreet glances. The trader blushed, stammered apologies, and lowered his price in shame. Abu Talib, watching from afar, smiled faintly. Later, alone with his nephew, he said, "You've learned quickly. Honesty has a high price in Mecca. Prepare yourself to pay it." Muhammad only nodded. Deep in his soul, he felt he would rather be wounded by truth than embraced by deceit. Yet what troubled him most was not business scams, but what he saw around the Kaaba. Hundreds of stone idols, each representing a different tribal god, receiving sacrifices, prayers, and vows. One night, after a long day's work, Muhammad and Abu Talib sat beside a small fire outside the city walls. "Why so many gods?" Muhammad asked, looking up at the starry sky. "Because men fear what they do not understand," his uncle replied, exhaling smoke from his warm drink. "And in fear, they create gods they can touch." Muhammad bowed his head, thoughtful. "What if there is only one?" he murmured. Abu Talib looked at him in surprise but said nothing. Such thoughts were dangerous in a city sustained by idolatry. Questioning stone gods was like poking a cobra's nest. Muhammad continued his honest trade, earning respect and better contracts, yet an inner unease grew within him. It was not ambition for power, nor a desire to be the greatest merchant. There was something more, a thirst that business could never slake. One particularly stifling afternoon, after another tough deal, he confided in his uncle. "Uncle, I see men who pray, sacrifice, and fast, yet remain empty. How can it be their gods do not answer? All they receive is silence." Abu Talib, pondering, spoke with a heavy voice. "Perhaps silence is the answer we deserve." But Muhammad would not accept that. Deep inside, he knew if there was a true creator, he could not be found among sculpted stones and empty promises. Often at night, he walked alone to the hills outside Mecca and lay in the cool sand, staring at the vast, silent sky. "O Creator, if you exist," Muhammad whispered, "guide me to you. Do not leave me lost among lies." These silent prayers, without human witness, were like seeds sown in eternity's invisible soil. While merchants celebrated their triumphs in feasts, Muhammad sought a victory not measured in treasure. While tribes erected statues and altars, he built within himself a secret shrine, a shrine of questions and hope. Seeing the seriousness in his nephew's face, Abu Talib felt a pang in his heart. One silent night, he pulled the young man close and said, "You were not made like the others, Muhammad, I see it. But be careful. Sometimes those who carry a different flame are the first to be stoned." Muhammad looked at the fire and replied, "Then let me burn with this flame, uncle. Better to be consumed by truth than live chained to lies." Abu Talib only bowed his head in silence, knowing his nephew was called to something beyond his understanding, something he could not protect. The silent, infinite desert seemed to hear those secret conversations, and in response, guarded its deepest mysteries. But it would be in the desert's most silent nights that Muhammad's destiny would begin to unfold. Before we continue, we ask for your support. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up to bless us and help us keep sharing these hidden stories of faith. Now, let's continue with the life of Mahomet, the prophet the world almost forgot. Mecca glittered under the merciless sun, its markets teeming with voices, gold and spices. The colorful tents stretched out like seas of silk, and the air was heavy with the scent of incense and sweat. Amid that crowd, Muhammad walked in silence, bearing in his hands an honesty that few could uphold in a world driven by greed. "I've heard you're different," a firm voice broke through his thoughts. Before him stood Khadija, a respected, wealthy woman of keen spirit. Her experienced eyes scanned Muhammad, seeking more than a trader. She sought character. "Bilm, may I have the honor of serving your caravan?" Muhammad replied, bowing his head in respect. "I do not seek merely someone to carry goods," she answered with a slight smile. "I seek someone to carry trust." Thus began the Maitrajajinde partnership between Muhammad and Khadija. He young and upright, she mature and wise. Under Muhammad's hands their business thrived, but something even more precious grew between them: mutual respect and admiration. After months of working side by side, Khadija, defying convention, proposed marriage. "Among all the men of Mecca, I have found no soul as pure as yours, Muhammad," she said one night beneath the silver glow of the moon. "And I do not seek wealth, Khadija," he replied sincerely. "I seek a home where the heart can rest." They were married, and the union brought Muhammad stability, comfort, and affection he had never known. For the first time, the orphan found a true home. Abu Talib, now aged, watched in silent pride. "You have built something more valuable than tents and caravans," his uncle said. "You have built respect." Muhammad smiled in response, yet inside his restlessness kindled like a flame that comfort could not quell. He loved Khadija. He cherished the peace she offered. He appreciated the success wrought by honest labor. But even amidst abundance, he felt like a traveler lost in the desert. His thirst remained unquenched. "Why does my heart still cry out, even surrounded by all I asked of God?" he would ask himself, lying beside Khadija on silent nights. She perceived the unrest in his gaze. "What torments you, my beloved?" she asked one evening, gently touching his face. "I do not know," Muhammad murmured, turning to the starry sky. "It is as if something greater is calling me, yet too distant for me to understand." Khadija's words were as gentle as the night breeze. "Then seek it, wherever it may be, however it may come, I will be with you." But the quest was not easy. The city's altars continued to rise for silent gods, even as Muhammad's heart cried out for something true, invisible, and eternal. He walked through the corridors of the Kaaba, watching with sorrowful eyes as men placed their hopes in mute stones. How can the hands that carved these images also believe they rule the heavens? He silently asked himself. Each empty ritual, each blind sacrifice was like a coal cast into his already burning soul. One day, returning from a market meeting, Muhammad poured out his frustration to Khadija. "The city worships the appearance of faith, but knows nothing of its essence. All I see are men kneeling before what they themselves have created." Khadija simply embraced him. In her silence lay more understanding than 1,000 words. His restlessness became unbearable. Sometimes, Muhammad awoke at night with his heart racing, as though he had heard his name called on the wind. "O Creator, where are you?" he whispered to the dark sky. "Show me the way, or the desert of my soul will consume me." The city, with all its riches and altars, no longer offered him peace. Neither love, nor success, nor stability could silence the call that burned within him, and that thirst would soon drive him beyond the city's limits. Mecca's streets lay sleeping under the night's gloom, but Muhammad was awake. Something within him urged him away. Beyond familiar walls, to where the city could not hear his silent questions. It was as if the desert itself called him to a rendezvous set before the world's creation. For days, he had withdrawn from the stalls, the coins, and the familiar faces. He sought refuge on the slopes of Mount Hira, a lonely rock that seemed to whisper promises to the wind. There, high among cold stones and absolute silence, Muhammad sought answers he could not yet even frame. "O Creator," he murmured, eyes lifted to the darkened sky, "I know you exist, but where are you?" Nights on Mount Hira were different. There was no scent of spices, no clink of coins, only the wind's whisper and his own heartbeat echoing between the stones. In the silence, he shed Mecca's illusions. In the silence, he felt small before the vastness of the unseen. Khadija, understanding, did not hold him back. When Muhammad set out in search of solitude, she only said, "Go, my beloved. Find what your spirit seeks. I will be waiting for you." On one night when the silence seemed denser than the very air, Muhammad knelt among the rocks and sensed a presence unlike wind or darkness. It was something or someone. A shiver ran through his spine, making his hairs stand on end. Suddenly, a voice sliced through the night like an invisible sword. "Recite!" Muhammad's eyes widened in fright. He looked around. No one, only the desert and the stars. "Recite!" the voice commanded again, louder, closer. I do not know how to recite," Muhammad cried, his body trembling. He tried to flee, but his legs failed him. The presence seemed to cloak him, filling the air, penetrating his skin, his blood, his soul. "Recite," the voice ordered a third time, and then, without understanding how, Muhammad felt words spring to his mind, words that seemed not his own, but flowed from his heart like an unstoppable river. "Recite in the name of your Lord who created man from a clinging clot. Recite, and your Lord is most generous." The words vibrated within him, shaking every fiber of his being. It was as if the universe itself had spoken, and his tiny soul had finally found what it was searching for. Muhammad fell to his knees, tears mingling with the dust beneath him. His chest heaved as though he had run 1,000 leagues. The presence withdrew, but left a mark on him that would never fade. Trembling, he rose and hurried down Mount Hira, stumbling over stones and shadows, like a man who had witnessed the impossible. When he reached home, Khadija ran to meet him. "Muhammad, what happened? You're as pale as death." He collapsed into her arms, his voice choked. Something extraordinary visited me, Khadija. I was commanded to recite, and the words, they flowed from me as if from an ocean I had never known. Khadija, her heart pounding, held him tightly. "Do not fear," she whispered. "The true God would never harm you. You are honest, faithful, just. Whatever this is, it is for a higher purpose." That night, Muhammad lay in Khadija's arms, but sleep would not come. The voice he had heard on the mountain still echoed in his thoughts like distant, eternal thunder. "Recite, recite." For the first time, Muhammad knew his life no longer belonged to him. He had been called to something that neither Khadija's peace nor Abu Talib's protection could preserve. In the days that followed, the memory of Mount Hira consumed him. Each word he had recited burned in his chest like holy fire. Muhammad understood that he now carried an invisible burden, and that this burden would not be light. "Khadija," he said one morning, eyes alight with new fervor, I have received a message, but how will men accept what they do not even know they have lost? She touched his face and replied, You have been chosen, Muhammad, and the truth always finds its way, even if it must carve paths in human hearts. Muhammad felt the weight of his mission before he comprehended its full scope. He knew what he had received was not to be kept silent, yet he also knew that bringing a new truth to a city so old in its traditions would be like planting seeds on soil hardened by time. In the solitude of the pre-dawn hours, he prayed, Lord, give me strength not to turn back. Give me courage to carry what you have placed in my hands. And the answer came not in audible words, but in a firm peace that filled his spirit with certainty. Still, the greatest challenge was only beginning. For he who had been called to recite would now have to speak, and those who heard his voice would bring not only acceptance, but hatred, betrayal, and war. The encounter on Mount Hira had changed Muhammad forever, but who would receive that message was only the beginning of the true conflict. The sun over Mecca shone with cruel intensity, but it was a different kind of heat that began to ignite hearts. For the first time in centuries, a solitary voice dared to break the stone and gold consensus that ruled the city. And that voice belonged to Muhammad. After the revelations on Mount Hira, he knew he could no longer hide. The command to recite was not only for him, it was a summons to all who dared to hear the true wind, not the empty breath of silent idols. Allah is one. There is no other besides him, Muhammad proclaimed one morning in the bustling center of the market. The shock hit like a storm among those present. Some laughed, others furrowed their brows, some merely looked at him with disdain. The words were simple, but their impact was like a stone thrown into a still lake. Abu Talib, watching closely, pulled Muhammad aside. You are right, nephew, but are you ready for what will come? I can no longer remain silent, uncle, Muhammad answered, with a firmness even he did not know he possessed. What I have received is not a treasure to be buried. At first, few followed him. His devoted wife Khadijah was the first to believe, followed by his young cousin Ali and his loyal friend Abu Bakr. They formed the first circle of faith, small as a timid flame in the midst of a storm. However, Mecca was not a city of innocence. It was a city accustomed to protecting its gods and its interests as one and the same. Soon, rumors spread like fire across dry grass. Muhammad has gone mad, some shouted in the alleys. He wants to destroy our gods, accused. Others in the corridors of the Kaaba, the tribal leaders, guardians of the old order, gathered in secret. Their tone was grave. If we let him continue, we will lose control of the pilgrimages, said one elder. The caravans will avoid Mecca, warned another. And if we just ignore him, suggested a third. Ignoring a fire does not prevent it from burning down the house, snapped an older man. It was then they decided to act. The next day, as Muhammad spoke to a small crowd at one of the city gates, the first open resistance appeared. "Be silent, Muhammad," cried one tribal leader. "Do not insult the gods of our fathers." "I do not insult them," Muhammad replied, standing unafraid. "I reveal them for what they are, deaf, mute stones, incapable of blessing or harming." The crowd murmured in shock. Some men advanced on him, but Abu Talib stepped between Muhammad and the aggressors. "If you wish to harm him," he said in a grave voice, You must pass through me first." Respect for the old warrior held their fists back for now, but the seed of hatred had been sown. That night, gathered with his few followers, Muhammad spoke with a heavy heart. "They will resist. They will mock. They will persecute us, but Allah is greater than fear, and we are called to something that neither they nor their gods can stop." Abu Bakr, his eyes shining with fervor, answered, "We are with you, Muhammad." Until the end, Ali, still young, clenched his fist. "Truth is more precious than life." Muhammad looked at his companions and saw in them not only courage, but destiny. He knew the path would be long and blood-stained, but he also knew that every word cast to the wind had power, even when it seemed lost in the desert. The sermons continued, ever bolder. Muhammad spoke in the marketplaces, in the squares, by the tents. He spoke of God's oneness, of justice, of mercy. He spoke of life beyond this life. And his words were like invisible spears, striking sleeping hearts. Some listened in silence, others openly jeered. "You're just one man against all of Mecca, Muhammad," mocked a merchant. "I am just one man," he replied serenely. "But with Allah, I am a nation." Soon threats became action. The poorest followers were the first to suffer, beaten in the streets, deprived of their livelihoods, driven from their families. Bilal, a slave who had embraced the new faith, was dragged through the streets and whipped under the sun while his tormentors laughed. "Renounce your God, Bilal," they shouted. But Bilal, flesh torn and bleeding, only repeated, "One, one." Muhammad saw this and felt the weight increase in his own chest. Every lash, every insult, every tear was like a nail driven into his own flesh. In the dead of night, kneeling on the desert sands, he cried, "Lord, strengthen us. Do not abandon us." The desert answered only with cold and silence, but in Muhammad's heart he knew the answer had already come on Mount Hira. Now was the time for resistance. As the people of Mecca raised their voices against him, Muhammad slowly became the city's most feared enemy, and soon the young preacher would become the city's most feared enemy. The desert's cutting wind seemed to carry with it the tension hanging over Mecca. In the narrow streets, the markets, even in the corridors of the Kaaba, Muhammad's name was whispered like a threat, like a silent fire no one knew how to extinguish. The tribal authorities, unable to silence him with words, decided to attack his roots, the honor, the livelihood, and the security of those who followed him. "If we cannot destroy his faith, we will destroy his life," declared one leader in a secret meeting. And so the invisible siege began. Trade with Muhammad's followers was boycotted. Entire families were threatened if they maintained any ties to the new believers. Childhood friends turned away in silence. Brothers renounced brothers. "I will not sell anything to you, renegade," shouted a merchant as Abu Bakr approached his stall. "We were friends," replied Abu Bakr, trying to contain his bitterness. "You were a friend until you became a traitor to our gods," spat the man, flicking saliva at the ground. The city, once bustling with the diversity of tribes and cultures, now seemed united in a single purpose: to crush the seed Muhammad had planted. Bilal, the faithful slave, was dragged through the streets. Again, his tormentors piled stones on his chest under the scorching sun, demanding he renounce his faith. "Renounce! Renounce!" they screamed, their voices full of hatred. "One! One!" Bilal whispered, his eyes closed as if his soul had already been transported elsewhere. Gradually, the homes of the first followers became prisons. No food was sold to them, no water offered, no act of compassion allowed. Muhammad, anguished, watched his brothers in faith suffer. "Lord," he pleaded in the early mornings, kneeling on the cold sand, "grant us strength, grant us patience. Do not leave us alone." But the desert answered only with silence. And silence in those days was sharper than any sword. Khadijah, with her wealth, tried to purchase provisions for the needy, but prices were purposefully inflated. Every gesture of help was undermined, every attempt at relief crushed. "They want to see us die," said Abu Bakr, lips parched after a clandestine meeting. "And if we must die, we will die standing," Muhammad replied, his voice as steady as the wind-blown sand. Even under such pressure, the number of followers grew, though slowly. Men and women, driven by hunger for a greater truth, risked everything to hear Muhammad's words by night's shadow. "Allah is one," he proclaimed to the gathered few. "He has no children, no partners, and all who believe in him will be freed, even if their bodies suffer." The response was a reverent silence. Those few hearts beat in unison, knowing they paid with blood for the freedom of their faith. The leaders of Mecca, seeing that social persecution was not enough, authorized physical violence. Armed men ambushed believers in the streets. Women were humiliated in public. Children were torn from their parents. Sumayya, one of the first women to embrace the faith, became the first martyr. Tied between two stakes, she was tortured before. The crowd, when offered her life in exchange for renunciation, she only whispered, "My Lord is Allah." And she died, leaving her name engraved not only in human memory, but in the heavens. Muhammad received news of her death with eyes filled with pain, yet even in grief he did not relent. "Every drop of blood will be a seed," he told those who remained. With each attack, each betrayal, their faith grew stronger, not because they sought suffering, but because the truth they carried was more powerful than pain. Abu Talib, still influential despite his advanced age, tried to protect Muhammad by appealing to the tribal chiefs. "He seeks no war. He only seeks freedom of faith. Let him be." But they refused. "As long as even one man believes in Allah," they said, "there will be no peace in Mecca." Thus Muhammad's followers began to gather in secret in nearby caves, hidden valleys in the dead of night. They softly chanted the first revealed verses, like lighting small candles in the darkness. "Recite, O Muhammad, in the name of your Lord," they whispered, each word a declaration of resistance. The desert, once mere witness, now seemed to guard each prayer as a precious jewel hidden from men's eyes. The invisible chains of rejection tightened around the young movement, but they also bound them together as nothing else could. Every tear shed, every pain endured, every loss accepted was a silent offering to the God who could not be seen, yet was more real than the desert that surrounded them, and the price for true faith would grow higher with each new day. The sun of Mecca showed no mercy. It bore down on the city like an unrelenting judge, scorching the skin and drying the eyes. But in those days, it was not the heat that weighed heaviest on the air. It was hatred. Muhammad's name now echoed through the alleys and markets like a living threat. For some, it was the sound of hope. For others, it was the harbinger of chaos. The tribal leaders, fearing loss of control over their people and their idols, hardened their persecution. It was no longer enough to ignore or boycott. Now the faith had to be eradicated by the power of blood. Sumaya, the elderly woman who had been among the first to proclaim Allah is one, became the target of fury. Captured alongside her husband Yasir and their son Ammar, she was brought to the public square as an example. "Renounce your God, Sumaya," demanded Abu Jahl, one of Mecca's cruelest lords. "Allah is one alone," she replied. Her voice steady as desert rock, the lashes tore into her frail body, but she did not relent. "Renounce him!" they shouted again as the crowd watched. Some in hatred, others in fear, a few with tears held back. "My Lord is Allah," she repeated. The next strike was fatal. Sumaya collapsed to the ground, blood mixing with dust. She became the first martyr of Islam, the first flower to bloom in the parched soil of persecution. Muhammad received the news with a shattered heart. He gathered his followers in secret, in a hidden cave among nearby hills. "Sumaya has triumphed," he said through tears. "She joined the Lord before they could steal her faith." Yasir, her old companion, soon followed the same path. Tortured to death, his last breath was also a whisper of worship. Allah is one. Grief swept through the small community like a whirlwind, yet it also strengthened them. Each martyr was a seed cast into the desert of hardened hearts. Ammar, the young son, survived, but not without carrying forever the marks of loss and humiliation. When he was freed after days of torture, he ran to Muhammad weeping, "Master, I yielded. I said what they wanted to save my life." Muhammad embraced him and said, "What matters is what you keep in your heart, Ammar. Allah sees the inside of a man. You are innocent before him." That forgiveness restored the youth's spirit, but left indelible marks on his soul. Meanwhile, throughout Mecca, Muhammad's followers were hunted like animals. Those who could hid their faith. Those who could not paid the price. "Renounce your madness or perish." The oppressors bellowed in the squares, yet many chose death rather than renunciation. One afternoon, Abu Bakr, trying to intercede for a believing slave, was beaten nearly senseless. Carried home, his body covered in wounds, he smiled through the pain. It was worth it, every blow, and for love of the one. Silent questions turned to Muhammad, and he, in a firm voice, taught, "The way of truth is narrow and full of thorns, but at its end is a garden that never withers." The nights grew darker still. Under the veil of darkness, Muhammad and his few followers recited the first revealed verses with voices choked by emotion. "Recite in the name of your Lord who created man from a clinging clot." Each word defied fear. Each verse an invisible sword against tyranny, but the price climbed ever higher. Zayd, a newly converted youth, was ambushed in an alley and beaten nearly to death. Rescued by secret friends, he spent days hovering between life and death, softly reciting, "Allah is one. Allah is one." Mothers hid their children. Men avoided public gatherings. The city, once brimming with life, was now a minefield of hatred and fear. In secret, Muhammad gathered his closest followers. "The day will come when Allah grants us victory," he said. "But before that, we must cross the valley of pain." No one protested. Every face there understood what that silent oath meant. Abu Talib, weakened by age, still tried to protect his nephew, yet even his influence began to crumble under the tribal chief's pressure. "I cannot protect you forever, Muhammad," he warned one night. "I ask not for protection, uncle. Muhammad replied serenely. "I only ask that they let me speak until Allah decides my end." The desert, silent witness to all secrets, seemed to hold in its sands the blood of those who dared believe. Every grain felt laden with sorrow. Every breeze whispered names. Sumaya, Yasir, Zayd. Mecca's ground, once watered only by the sweat of commerce and the dust of caravans, was now soaked with the blood of those who believed in the unseen. But the desert would still demand more tears before liberation. Night fell over Mecca like a leaden cloak. The stars, which once seemed to promise hope, now silently watched the steps of the hunters. Muhammad knew. The city that had seen him born now plotted his death. Gathered in the shadows, the tribal leaders had finally made their decision. "Tomorrow, before the sun rises, we will put an end to this," decreed Abu Jahl, hatred in his eyes. "One strike from each tribe. That way, no one can be blamed alone." The news spread like poison through the alleys. But before the blade could fall, Allah revealed the enemy's plan to Muhammad. In his modest home, surrounded by his few, faithful followers, Muhammad spoke in a low, firm voice. "Tonight I will depart." Ali, still young, looked at him with determined eyes. "Let me sleep in your bed, O Muhammad," he said. "If they come for you, they will find me." "May Allah protect you, cousin," Muhammad replied, gently touching his head. While Ali lay down under Muhammad's cloak, ready for sacrifice, the Prophet left the city under cover of darkness. His bare feet touched the hot stones of the night, and his heart beat strongly, not from fear but from the pain of leaving the land where his ancestors were buried. Beside him, Abu Bakr walked in silence, his face grave. "Allah's promise is true," Abu Bakr whispered, trying to encourage his friend. "He is our protector," Muhammad answered. They walked along hidden paths, evading watchful eyes, ambushes, and nighttime traders. Every sound in the dark felt like a warning. Every shadow seemed to conceal an enemy. At one point, Abu Bakr pulled Muhammad into a small cave called Thar. There, hidden among the rocks, they spent days. Outside, the desert boiled with searches. Armed men patrolled the valleys, offering rewards for Muhammad, promising gold to anyone who brought his head. Inside the cave, Muhammad prayed. "Oh, Lord, we are alone here, but with you we are the majority." One night, as Muhammad rested against the cave's cold wall, Abu Bakr saw a group of pursuers approaching. "They are so close, Muhammad," he whispered, desperation in his voice. "If they just look inside, they will see us." "Do not fear, Abu Bakr," Muhammad replied calmly. "What do you make of two whose companion is Allah?" The Creator sent signs in favor of the two fugitives. A spider wove its web at the cave's entrance, and a pigeon built its nest right there. When the pursuers arrived, they looked at the entrance, saw the intact web and the undisturbed nest. "He cannot be here," one said. "No one would pass through a web without breaking it." And they left. Relief swept over the two men like a divine breath. A few days later, with the path relatively safe, Muhammad and Abu Bakr resumed their journey. It was an arduous crossing. The sun burned mercilessly, thirst cut the throat, but hope propelled them forward. In the distance, the city of Yathrib, future Medina, appeared like a promised oasis. When they finally reached the city gates, they were greeted not with swords, but with open arms. "Welcome, O Messenger of Allah!" people cried. Men, women, and children lined along the streets. It was a sight Muhammad would never forget. The people of Medina saw in him not only a spiritual leader, but a peacemaker, a hope for reconciliation among their divided tribes. But Muhammad knew the journey did not end there. In his heart, he felt the pain of leaving his homeland, loved ones behind, and the martyrs whose blood had watered Mecca's sands. That first night in Medina, Muhammad looked up at the sky and prayed, "O Allah, guide us in this new land, strengthen us as you strengthened those who came before us." Medina offered shelter, but not guaranteed peace. There, new challenges would arise, new conflicts would emerge from the sands. New battles would be fought not only with swords, but with hardened hearts. For changing cities was easy. The difficult task was changing the hearts of men. As Muhammad walked the streets of Medina, hopeful gazes fixed on him, he felt the weight of responsibility grow on his shoulders. He was no longer just the orphan of Mecca, the honest merchant, the persecuted prophet. Now he was the leader of a people, and the deserts of the new city would bring even deeper challenges. The sun rose differently that day. Over the city of Medina, the first rays seemed to carry the promise of a new beginning. For Muhammad and his followers, it was not just the birth of another day, it was the birth of a new life. The journey from Mecca had left deep marks. Every step, every loss, every tear had shaped them. Now, upon arriving in that foreign land, they carried with them only two things: faith and hope. Medina was a divided city. Rival tribes had competed for power and prestige for generations. The tension in the air was thick, like a storm about to break. But with Muhammad's arrival, the possibility of healing also emerged. Within days, local leaders approached him. Their eyes were cautious, but their words held a spark of hope. "We have come to hear you, O Muhammad," said Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, one of the respected chiefs. "They say you bring a word of peace." "The peace I bring," Muhammad replied serenely, "is that which begins within a man and flows out to his brothers." Reunions were arranged. Men from the Aus and Khazraj tribes, ancient enemies, sat side by side for the first time in decades. The heat of distrust was intense, but the thirst for change was stronger still. Under the shade of date palms, the Pact of Medina was born, an agreement that sealed not only coexistence between the Muslims and the local tribes, but also a new vision of society, a community founded on justice, mercy, and faith. "We will all protect one another as brothers," Muhammad proclaimed. "There shall be no oppression among us. The strong will support the weak, the rich will feed the poor, and every life will hold the same value before Allah." The words echoed like thunderous hope. Never before had that land heard such a clear call for equity. It was established that all, Muslims, Jews, even pagans, whether converted or not, would live under the same laws of mutual protection and respect, as long as they pledged loyalty to the new community. "Whoever betrays us betrays himself," Muhammad warned, "and whoever protects shall be protected by the Most High." The followers, still wounded by Mecca's persecution, found in Medina fertile ground where faith could finally flourish. For the first time in years, they could pray aloud without fear. They could gather in daylight, free of chains. The small community grew with each dawn. Poor people, freed slaves, honorable warriors, all came together to hear Muhammad teach. The precepts he received about Allah, about mercy, about the life to come. "You are not superior by your lineage or your tribe," he would say, gathered around men and women. "You are only superior by your righteousness before God." Muhammad's words shaped hearts like the wind shapes desert dunes. Gradually, the city gained a new soul. Abu Bakr, watching children play freely in the streets, remarked, It is like planting a garden in the desert, O Muhammad. And that garden, Abu Bakr, the Prophet replied with a smile, will grow until it covers the whole earth. But not all was tranquility. Within Medina's walls lurked those who feigned acceptance of the new order, while plotting in the shadows. Abdullah ibn Ubay, a local chief who had lost influence due to Muhammad's arrival, gnawed at his envy. His wounded pride would not allow him to fully support the new leader. "He has taken what was ours," he muttered through clenched teeth. "An outsider from Mecca now commands what should be mine." And beyond Medina, Mecca had not forgotten. The Quraysh leaders, furious at Muhammad's escape with his followers, swore vengeance. "He builds a new home," said Abu Jahl, venom in his voice, "but we will build him a tomb." They sent spies, fueled rumors, conspired with neighboring tribes. War was no longer a distant threat. It was a shadow growing each day, silent, menacing. Meanwhile, Muhammad prepared his followers, not for a war of conquest, but for a war for the survival of faith. "Allah has given us this land," he said at a gathering, "but to keep it will demand courage and patience." They raised their hands to the sky. "We are yours, O Allah. Let us be instruments of your will." Medina, the new home, pulsed with hope. But it also trembled under the weight of unseen dangers approaching, and in the stillness of night, as the city slept and the wind whispered across distant dunes, Muhammad prayed, "Lord, strengthen our hearts for what is to come," because the spiritual war was far from over. The desert seemed to hold its breath, as though it knew blood would soon stain its sands. The tension between Mecca and Medina had erupted into open war, and Muhammad's name was no longer whispered in hatred. It was wielded as a banner of both hope and terror. Mecca's caravans were vital to its economic survival. Guided by the need to protect his new community, Muhammad decided to intercept them, undermining his enemy's strength. "They drove us from our land," he told, "his followers under the moonlight, and now they seek our destruction. Let us defend ourselves with faith and courage." It was no call to plunder, rather a fight for the survival of their faith, a fight for existence. When news arrived that a wealthy caravan was approaching, Medina Muhammad assembled a small army. Only 300 men, many without armor, few with decent swords. Abu Bakr approached him on the eve of battle. "We are few, O Messenger of Allah." "But Allah is with us," Muhammad replied, eyes shining. Across the desert, Meccan leaders reacted with fury. They mustered 1,000 warriors, armed, men mounted on decorated horses, ready to crush the rebels of Medina. The two forces met at a place called Badr, a sandy valley ringed by rolling dunes. Upon seeing the size of the enemy army, some of Muhammad's men trembled. "If we are defeated here, no one will speak of Allah on this land again," one muttered. Muhammad raised his hands to the sky and prayed passionately, "O Lord, if this small band is destroyed, there will be none left to worship you on earth." Then to the thunder of footsteps and neighing horses, the battle began. The clash was brutal. Sand and blood swirled together in chaotic whirlwinds. Swords rang, spears ripped through the air, cries echoed among the dunes. But something extraordinary occurred. Despite their numerical inferiority, the believers fought with a strength that seemed to come from another realm. It was as if an invisible hand sustained them. "Allahu Akbar!" they cried as they advanced, their eyes alight with zeal. By day's end, against all odds, the Muslims were victorious. Several Meccan leaders fell on the battlefield, their heavy armor useless against the lightness of faith. The triumph at Badr was like the dawn of a new sun for the Medina community. They were no longer merely refugees and the persecuted. They had become a real, respected and feared force. But that joy was short-lived. Humiliated, the Meccan leaders swore revenge. A year later, they gathered an even larger army, determined to erase Muhammad's name from the face of the earth. The new confrontation took place at Mount Uhud, a rocky hill north of Medina. Before the battle, Muhammad assembled his men and said, "To fight, but obey. Whether you see victory or defeat, do not abandon your posts." The battle began fiercely. Initially, the Muslims dominated the field. Meccan forces retreated in disarray, but the temptation was great. A group of archers, disobeying Muhammad's orders, abandoned their position to collect the spoils of the fleeing enemy. It proved a fatal mistake. Mecca's forces, led by Khalid ibn al-Walid, seized the opportunity. They attacked from the rear, turning near victory into a bloody disaster. Muhammad was wounded, his teeth were broken, his face was cut. Rumors of his death spread rapidly across the battlefield, sowing panic. "The messenger is dead," shouted some, dropping their weapons. But Muhammad, bloodied, rose from the carnage and cried out, "I am alive! Come to me!" The prophet's voice, full of pain yet brimming with courage, rallied his followers. They formed a circle around him and held their ground until the battle's tide subsided. The cost was terrible. Many of Medina's finest lay silent in the sand, their eyes fixed forever on a sky they would never see again. That night, as they buried their dead, Muhammad looked up and prayed, "Lord, forgive our faults, strengthen us in our weakness, and let not this defeat turn us away from you." The Battle of Uhud was a deep wound, a painful lesson that faith is not merely a cry of victory, but a journey through thorns. The faithful learned that obedience is as vital as courage, and Muhammad, with a heavy heart, understood that the road to true victory would be longer and bloodier than they had imagined. Because the greatest battle had yet to begin. The wind blew fiercely over Medina, raising clouds of dust that blinded the eyes and scratched the skin. But in those days, it was not the wind that hurt most. It was the invisible poison that began to circulate among those whom Muhammad trusted. After the battles of Badr and Uhud, the tension within Medina grew even denser. Tribes that had once pledged their loyalty now began to falter. False smiles, furtive glances, secret meetings, all revealed that betrayal was sprouting like a weed among the city's date palms. "Should we trust them, O Messenger?" Abu Bakr asked after hearing unsettling rumors. "Trust is like an earthenware vessel," Muhammad replied, staring at the horizon. "Once broken, even if mended, it is never the same." Among the most notorious traitors was Abdullah ibn Ubay, the chieftain who had never truly accepted Muhammad's leadership. Feigning loyalty in public, he plotted secret alliances with the enemies of the new faith. "Muhammad has brought us only war and famine," he whispered in shadowed corridors. "Before him, we were free to worship as we wished." His venom spread in silence, corroding trust at the community's core. At one point, Muhammad received even graver news. Some Jewish tribes of Medina, signatories of the Mutual Protection Pact, were negotiating with Mecca. "If that is true," Umar said, clenching his fists, "we will have no choice but to act." "Justice belongs to Allah," Muhammad replied, "but the protection of the community is our responsibility." Betrayal became painfully clear in one dark episode. A group of Muslims was invited by a tribe to teach them the new faith. Trusting their word, they set out, only to fall into an ambush. Zayd, one of the envoys, was captured and dragged before a crowd thirsty for vengeance. Before his execution, they offered him his life if he would renounce his faith. "I would rather die than deny the messenger of Allah," he declared, voice steady. He died, upholding the truth to his last breath. When Muhammad learned of Zayd's fate, the weight of betrayal crushed his chest. He gathered his followers in prayer, silent tears tracing their faces. "We are surrounded by enemies, visible and invisible," he said. "Each of us is called to guard the faith, even when the blade touches our throat." The pain of betrayal differed from the pain of battle. It tore at the soul, not just the body, and such wounds took far longer to heal. Muhammad resolved to act with wisdom and firmness. He visited each tribe named in the rumors, giving them the chance either to reaffirm their pacts or to declare themselves open enemies. "Whoever seeks peace shall have peace," he declared, "but whoever chooses betrayal shall reap its consequences." Some tribes repented. Others revealed their true colors. One especially painful moment was the betrayal of the Banu Qurayza. At the height of hostilities, while Medina faced invasion, they broke the pact and conspired to hand the city over to Mecca. They tore up the scroll they themselves had written, lamented Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, one of Medina's leaders. Muhammad knew that trust is like broken glass. With a heavy heart, but bound to protect the innocent, he led the response to their treachery. After the tribe's surrender, arbitration was held, and Sa'd ibn Mu'adh was chosen as judge. His verdict was severe, but fitting the gravity of the betrayal. "Your treachery would have cost us all our lives," Sa'd declared. "This sentence is just before Allah." Those events split Medina in two. On one side, the faithful, weeping and praying. On the other, those who secretly longed for the new order's downfall. Muhammad walked the streets, the burden of leadership etched in every line of his face. With each step he prayed silently, "Lord, guide us, for the poison of betrayal is deadlier than the enemy's blade." Even his closest companions felt the blow. "You are quieter than ever, O Muhammad," Ali remarked one silent afternoon. "When the wind brings sand, my son," the Prophet replied with a sad smile, "one must close the eyes and follow the path by memory." Betrayal's poison ate away at the newly planted hope, but Muhammad knew he must keep the flame of faith alive even when the wind strove to extinguish it. For Muhammad's courage was about to be tested as never before. The desert sands lay restless. The wind brought omens of change. After years of persecution, betrayal, and battles, Muhammad knew the time to return to Mecca was approaching. This was no return driven by hatred, no march to avenge old wounds. It was something greater, a march guided by compassion. The city that expelled us, that persecuted us, that shed the blood of our brothers, will be the same city to witness Allah's mercy, Muhammad said. Gathered with his closest, Abu Bakr looked at him, eyes heavy with memories. "And if they resist, O Messenger, then we will fight," Muhammad replied without hesitation. "But if they surrender, we will show that Allah is more generous than the sword." The plan was meticulous. Muhammad ordered that no civilian be harmed, no temple profaned, no home violated. Only those who bore arms would be confronted. "Let it be clear," he instructed his commanders, "today is no day for vanity. It is a day of humility before a promise fulfilled. An army of 10,000 men was assembled, once slaves and outcasts, now marching side by side with noble warriors and converted tribal leaders. They approached Mecca in reverent silence, each footstep in the sand laden with memories. Bilal's tears, Sumayya's blood, the losses at Uhud, the nights of famine, and fear in Medina. As they neared the hills around the city, Muhammad ordered, "Light fires across the valley. Let them see we are many, but let them know we come not as conquerors." The light shimmered like a sea of stars on earth. Mecca trembled in the distance. Within its walls, panic spread. The very leaders who had vowed to crush Muhammad now whispered, in fear, "What will we do? If he chooses vengeance, none of us will escape," said another. Some planned flight, others thought to resist, but most felt fate sealed. That night, Abu Sufyan, a chief of Mecca and once Muhammad's fiercest enemy, was captured spying on the Muslim camp. Brought before the Prophet, he declared, "I testify that there is no God but Allah." Muhammad looked into his eyes and proclaimed, "Whoever takes refuge in Abu Sufyan's house shall be safe. Whoever stays in his house shall be safe. Whoever shelters in the Kaaba shall be safe." Mercy was announced even before victory. At dawn, Muhammad mounted his camel and entered Mecca, head bowed in humility. No triumphant fanfare, only the silent march of Allah's servant fulfilling his destiny. The gates opened without resistance. Men and women peered from behind curtains, fearful of the worst, yet finding only compassion in the eyes of the one they had once sworn to destroy. Muhammad approached the Kaaba, dismounted, and gazed upon the sanctuary once ringed by 360 idols. "The truth has arrived," he murmured, tears in his eyes, "and falsehood has perished." Ali added at his side. With his own hands, Muhammad began to cleanse the shrine. One by one, the idols were toppled, grotesque forms once venerated, collapsing like dust before the presence of the one God. "Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!" cried the believers, filling the courtyard with new life. Each broken statue was a shattered chain, each fragment on the ground an unseen liberation. The city, stunned into silence, confronted a truth it had long tried to bury. Standing before the purified Kaaba, Muhammad proclaimed, "There is no God but Allah. He has fulfilled his promise. He has strengthened his servant. He alone has defeated the enemies." He then asked, "O people of Mecca, what do you think I will do? Do you?" A heavy silence fell. Many expected a sentence of death. Instead, Muhammad said, "I tell you what Joseph said to his brothers. Today there is no reproach against you. May Allah forgive you. He is the most merciful of the merciful." A collective sigh swept the crowd. Some wept, others knelt. None could have imagined that after so much hatred, such mercy would prevail. Abu Bakr, moved to tears, stepped forward. "O Messenger of Allah, today you have written a new page in history." "It was not I," Muhammad replied humbly. "It was Allah." And thus, without bloodshed, without humiliation, without revenge, Mecca embraced the new faith. Yet in Muhammad's heart lay the sense that his mission was not yet complete. Tumor, silence that fell over Mecca was merely the antechamber of an act no one yet dared to imagine. The sun rose over Mecca like never before. The mountains surrounding the city, long accustomed to silently watching blind worship of stone idols, now bore witness to something that would change history forever. Muhammad entered the city astride, his camel, head bowed in humility. A silent army followed him. No shouts of conquest, no songs of victory, only the steady sound of footsteps on sand and the whisper of the wind. The streets, once alive with the colors of the markets and chants, to stone gods, were now mute. Men and women peered from windows, fearing the fury they expected, but finding only compassion in the eyes of the man they had once sworn to destroy. When he reached the Kaaba, Muhammad dismounted quietly. He gazed at the sanctuary, once surrounded by 360 idols, and felt his soul tremble. "The truth has arrived," he murmured, tears in his eyes. "And falsehood has perished," Ali added at his side. Then with his own hands, Muhammad began to cleanse the shrine. One by one, the idols were toppled, their grotesque forms, once feared and venerated, crumbling to dust before the presence of the one God. "Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!" the believers cried, filling the courtyard with new life. Each broken statue was like a snapped chain. Each fragment on the ground was an invisible liberation. The city, frozen in stunned silence, found itself forced to confront a truth it had long tried to smother. Standing before the purified Kaaba, Muhammad proclaimed, "There is no God but Allah. He has fulfilled his promise. He has strengthened his servant. He alone has defeated the enemies." He then addressed the crowd, "O people of Mecca, Allah has commanded that you worship none but him. There shall be no more intermediaries between man and his creator." Mecca's silence was broken by the sound of the first unified prayer, echoing across mountains and valleys, like the desert itself, witness to centuries of idolatry and error, exhaling a great sigh of relief. Bilal, the former slave who had been whipped in Mecca's streets, was summoned to the top of the Kaaba. There, voice trembling with emotion, he called out the first adhan, the call to prayer, "Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar." His words cut through the air, piercing generations. Of darkness, many wept, others ashamed hid their faces. But all felt in that moment that the age of mute stones had come to an end. Abu Sufyan, who years before had marched to destroy Muhammad, now watched in silence, heart heavy. "I have never seen anything like this," he whispered to his companion. "I have never seen a conqueror forgive without humiliating." No words were needed in reply. The answer lay in the breeze that swept among the fallen idols. In the days that followed, Muhammad set Mecca in order. He established the regular prayers, abolished long-standing injustices, and inaugurated a new era of hope. "All of you are from Adam," he would tell his assemblies, "and Adam was created from dust. No longer would tribe, color, or status divide them. The new order rested on faith and righteousness alone." Yet Muhammad knew the struggle was not over. The true battle, the one waged within the human heart, had only just begun. "The hardest task," he told his followers, "is not conquering lands, but conquering souls." Medina and Mecca, now sister cities under the light of revelation, still faced greater trials ahead. The fight against pride, against ego, against the old ghosts of the past. Late one night, alone before the purified Kaaba, Muhammad knelt and prayed, "O Lord, you have fulfilled your promise. Do not let us stray now that you have freed us." The sands in silence seemed to murmur an ancient response. From the time when the first man walked the earth, the struggle for good never ends. Mecca had fallen silent, but history still concealed a mystery that few dared to face. Years passed like winds over the dunes. The orphan boy of Mecca, once persecuted, once a refugee, once a disbelieved prophet, had become the leader of a faith spreading like an undying flame across the Arabian Peninsula. Medina blossomed. Tribes that once fought now walked side by side under Allah's banner. Former enemies became brothers. And Muhammad, who sought neither crown nor throne, was the heart of a new nation. Yet within him lay a question never stilled. At night, beneath the starry mantle, he would walk alone, lost in thought. The faith's expansion was undeniable. The peace he had dreamed of was taking shape. But one question always returned, like distant thunder. Why do the ancient books not speak? Of me, he would whisper to the wind. One day, gathered with his closest companions, he finally addressed the matter burning in his breast. The Torah and the Gospel, he said, looking at Abu Bakr and Ali, speak of the prophets who came before, and there are signs that point to me. Yet my name is not there, not as they expected, not as it should be. Perhaps men hid it. O messenger, Abu Bakr suggested, voice full of reverence. Or perhaps Allah reserved that secret for a different time, Ali said, eyes shining with mystery. Muhammad bowed his head in meditation. I am but a servant, he murmured. I seek not glory but understanding. The wisest among them recalled passages of scripture, promises of a comforter, of a prophet like Moses, of a chosen servant. But clarity never came like hewn stone. It always came as a whisper, an intimation. Still, one thing was undeniable. Muhammad's work bore the same fruits as those of the ancient prophets: justice, compassion, truth, unity. If the words of old have been distorted, Muhammad said, it is not my glory that has been lost, but theirs that has been defiled. He understood that he needed no parchment's endorsement. His mission came from on high, and its seal lay in the transformations his teachings wrought in human hearts. Allah is witness to what was and what will be, he would say with serenity. Yet in the quietest nights, the question whispered again, like wind-blown sand. Why did the Bible not name me clearly? The answer ripened in Allah's secret time. His final years, Muhammad felt his departure draw near. During his last pilgrimage to Mecca, known thereafter as the Farewell Pilgrimage, he delivered a sermon that would echo through eternity. O people, I leave you with two legacies, the Book of Allah and my example. Follow them, and you shall never go astray. His words fell upon the hearers like rain on parched earth. Today I have perfected your religion for you, he said, quoting the revelation of that day, and completed my favor upon you, and chosen Islam as your religion. It was the final signature, a confirmation that the story begun with Adam, carried through Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, was now sealed with him. Yet for many, the explicit absence of his name from earlier scriptures remained a shadow over his memory. We did not forget him, Bilal would whisper one night. They closed their eyes. In his last days, weakened by illness, Muhammad summoned his strength to speak to his companions. Do not exalt me as the Christians have exalted the Son of Mary, he warned. I am only a servant, a messenger. Ali, kneeling at his bedside, squeezed his hand. You are the missing link, O Muhammad, he whispered, tears cutting his face. The prophet smiled faintly. His mission was accomplished, his heart at peace. Deep down he knew, the omission of his name from earlier scriptures was not an oversight, but part of a greater mystery, a veil that Allah had placed so that sincere hearts would seek him not by dead letters, but by the living breath of faith. For truth is not bound to papyrus or stone. Truth lives. The faith Muhammad planted would grow beyond deserts, mountains, and seas. His name would be uttered billions of times across the earth. His example would be followed by countless generations. Yet the question, whispered on silent nights, still echoed, "Why did the Bible not call me by name?" And the answer was about to be revealed. For the truth was poised to break its silence, and it would change everything. The desert wind had long since carried away the echoes of battles, prayers, and tears. Muhammad's earthly mission was complete. His name, once insignificant, now reverberated among peoples across generations. Yet one question still hovered above. Time and sands, why did the Bible, the sacred book that preceded his coming, never recognize Muhammad as a prophet? The answer was not lost. It had been written centuries before in the very pages of Scripture. In the book of Galatians, the Apostle Paul issued a solemn warning. "But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be accursed." Galatians 1:8. "I say again, if anyone is preaching to you a gospel contrary to the one you received, let him be accursed." Galatians 1:9. These words were no accident. They formed an unbreachable wall around the revelation of Christ, an explicit injunction that after him no new message or gospel could be accepted as divine truth. Sincerity, popular leadership, even noble teaching were not enough. God's faithfulness was sealed in his word, and any other path would be deemed a deviation, no matter the courage, suffering, or compassion that accompanied it. Years later, the Apostle John likewise warned, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, for many false prophets have gone out into the world." 1 John 4:1. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God, and every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God, but is the spirit of the Antichrist. 1 John 4:2-3. Thus, Muhammad's absence from Holy Scripture was neither oversight nor forgetfulness, but deliberate silence, a preemptive alert, a sign of God's eternal faithfulness to his singular, definitive revelation, the gospel of Christ. Moses, Elijah, Isaiah, John the Baptist, all had pointed to the coming of one Savior, Jesus Christ. None spoke of another mediator, of a second messenger after the cross. Muhammad, despite his admirable leadership, his courage under rejection, and his heartfelt wish to shape a people, could not be recognized by the Scriptures as a true prophet of God. For in his wisdom, God had sealed the story of redemption in the person of his Son, and no one, absolutely no one, could alter that plan. In the Bible's silence lay a deafening answer. The revelation was complete. The word was fulfilled. At the end of his life, Muhammad saw nations bowing to the message he proclaimed. But the Bible, the lamp for our feet and light for our path, Psalm 119:105, never shifted its testimony. God's faithfulness does not waver before multitudes or human achievements. He remains unchangeable. His word does not contradict itself. His promise is unrevoked. So even while acknowledging Muhammad's remarkable human greatness, the Bible holds fast to its warning. There will be no other gospel, no other mediator, no other way besides Christ. This is the truth that echoes above the sands of time, and the Bible's silence on Muhammad was no accident. It stands as a testament to God's eternal faithfulness to his immutable word. If you enjoyed this story, 2 more videos about biblical narratives and extraordinary characters will appear on your screen. Click to watch them and dive even deeper into these journeys of faith and triumph. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. May God be with you.